think about what Milton, the inspiration, is an inspiration that comes from a passion, a love, right?
And he's drawn up into the Empyreal air. He gets a breath of the sort of heavens.
It is the activity of being human, is to clean the mirror of the soul.
Paradise can always be lost and it can always be regained.
Oh dear Diana, tell me why do the things that are beautiful always have a darker side? Oh dear Diana, tell me why is the good never good enough underneath the dirt and scar?
Welcome to another episode, and we're going to do something a little different today, which is to talk about Milton's Paradise Lost. We're going to talk about book 7, maybe reading some passages, seeing what inspires us, talking about some of the ideas that arise. And really, this is a profound and beautiful text with so many layers of reference and meaning. Really, this kind of sedimented layers of the historical Christian-Platonic tradition. So many of the things we've covered and talked about in different ways. And yeah, I mean, I think there's just a lot here, a lot to take in terms of contemplation, beauty, and in particular here, the image of creation and how we understand that. And so in this book, it's beginning really with a prayer, a kind of a call to prayer in a way. Descend from heaven, Urania, by that name, if rightly thou art called, whose voice divine, following above the Olympian hill I saw, above the flight, the Pegasian wing. And so we have in that the beginning, something that we find in the tradition, open book 1 of the Odyssey, and we have the lines, "Tell me, Muse, the man of many ways who has driven far journeys after he had sacked Troy's sacred citadel." So it's this sort of call to inspiration, a call to muse. And Urania, Uranos, Hyperonius, Topos, and so on, the heavens. So there's a call to the heavens for a kind of inspired, poetic muse, if you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that I find fascinating, and I'm sure many scholars have noted this, is the importance of the fact that descend from heaven, Urania, by that name, if rightly. So it's a question, right? Is Urania the right name? And then the line after the one that you recited, the meaning, not the name I call, right? Like, so this
Yeah.
understanding of the differences between the words that we use to invoke the muse or the goddess or the heavens, right? Or that which is, the space or place of receiving the divine, right? That what we call it might be one thing, but, because later on he's going to say, not just the muse but Urania, like bigger than that. And so that you get this sense that that this inspiration, that this invocation is to go as high as, so even with the Pegasian wing, right? I get this idea that it's higher than a hero's journey, right? It's
Mm.
far beyond even those kinds of stories. And so
Well, yeah, and of course in the myth, Bellerophon, well, his wings are clipped, as it were, by Zeus, in his aspiration to climb. And when we find that in the later lines, the allusion to that myth a little further. And what we find a little further on then is this interesting connection to and kind of interconnection between, on the one hand, Greek mythology, and on the other hand, the Bible, scripture, and Christian theology. So, as you said, the meaning, not the name I call. For thou, nor of the Muses 9, nor on the top of old Olympus dwellest, but heavenly born. Before the hills appeared or fountain flowed, thou with eternal wisdom didst converse. Wisdom, thy sister, and with her didst play in presence of the Almighty Father, pleased with thy celestial song.
It's so beautiful. Like
It's so incredible, isn't it? I
you
mean,
you imagine Urania and eternal wisdom like playing and like children in front of
yeah.
the Almighty Father before, and it reminds me of the opening of the Phaedrus, right? When you hear about the princess who's going to get swept up by Boreas playing with Pharmacon, right? And so
Mm.
there's a parallel between Urania and the heavens that's going to be snatched away, right? We know from the Phaedrus playing with her sister or her friend Pharmacon, the medicine, and getting that parallel to eternal wisdom, right? And just in that small image, right? There's the tinge of Platonism already there. So
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this image of play as well is so important, isn't it? And we've talked about this in some other contexts before. And the biblical references here are to Proverbs and wisdom. So um, the passage here is referencing Proverbs 8, which I could read, I guess, for some context here. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water, before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world. You know, so this is the kind of line, isn't it? And in other um translations of the Bible, the word play is used here instead of rejoicing um, in this passage. Um, and yeah, and then the other connection is to the description of wisdom in Sophia, wisdom in the Book of Wisdom,
yep, of
and that's
course.
also in 7 and 8. Um, and I mean that's you know quite incredible as well. The description of wisdom. For in her there is a spirit that is intelligent, holy, unique, manifold, subtle, mobile, clear, unpolluted, distinct, invulnerable, loving the good, keen, irresistible, beneficent, humane, steadfast, sure, free from anxiety, all powerful, overseeing all, and penetrating all spirits that are intelligent and pure and most subtle. For wisdom is more mobile than any motion. Because of her pureness, she pervades and penetrates all things. She is a breath of the power of God and a pure emanation of the glory of the Almighty. She is a reflection of eternal light, a spotless mirror of the working of God and an image of his goodness. So these are the passages here
Mhm.
which Milton is
Yeah.
invoking, in those biblical passages, which are, again, even in kind of literary, non-scriptural terms, are quite beautiful.
No, I want
Uh,
to say that he invokes the spotless mirror later in this particular section. I
right.
can't remember exactly where, but yeah, I vaguely recall it. I think when he makes the human being, maybe. And so, uh, yeah,
Well, it's a common image because you find it in
Plotinus, yeah.
Dionysius the Areopagite.
Hmm.
Says this. He says, we must become spotless mirrors.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a recurrent, again, another recurrent symbol. And as you know, in the Platonic tradition,
That's
of
what I was going
course,
to say. Plotinus, of course, this is what, we're supposed to
yeah,
do. This is the activity of being human, is to clean the mirror of the soul, right? And
yeah,
I'm always using it as an example too of it begins in Orphism, as well, right? Where the thing that tempts Dionysius from his throne is the mirror, right?
mm,
And so that here, this mirror is both temptation, but also sacramentality, or part of the work of purification, is to make it spotless, right? To make it clean. And so, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it's an interesting image, the mirror, isn't it? Because of the possibility of distortion, of mistaken images, and these kinds of things. Um, but we find you find in Aquinas, angels are described as mirrors of God. Dante, in the Divine Comedy, uses the image of mirrors frequently. In fact, there's a really incredible passage towards the end of the Paradiso where um, Dante is told to look upon the face of Mary,
Mm,
whose face is most like Christ, so that in looking at her, he can mirror his vision to see God,
mhm.
to sort of see the highest thing. So he has to, so it's an interesting image, because through wisdom, through this figure of the Marian figure, the divine feminine, he purifies his vision, let's say, to see God. But he
Interesting.
has to look at her face.
Yeah.
So it's an incredible image. So I think even just in these couple of lines, what
Yeah.
we have here is this kind of incredibly condensed allusion to this, you know, incredible set of images.
But this is what I love about rereading text, with new lenses, so to speak, because when I was younger, I didn't pick up on the centrality of the divine feminine, even in an author like Milton, right? I was enraptured by this story of the fall, right, and all of this intricate cosmology and things like this, but my eyes had not yet been attuned, right, to the value, because we get inundated all the time with like this, the authors of the past were all patriarchs and sexist, and they only use the feminine in order to make it an ideal, and to make it impossible for women to ever but reading these things now, like none of these things are going through Milton's mind, right? He's just in reverence, right, in awe, and like fear and trembling, as Kierkegaard would reiterate, right?
Mm,
Like, no, please, oh Urania, I know I might mess up your name, and so this real sacrosanct kind of attitude towards that which we typically always make either neutral or masculine, and he's not ashamed
mm,
in any way, shape, or form, because there is a deep root of this Christian love of the divine feminine, right? That is
mm,
both something that bears the divine, but also reflects the divine, and it's that living principle both within our wisdoms, our mobile wisdoms, as
mm,
you quoted, as well as in that Urania, that heavenly.
mm.
I'm going to argue that Urania is this principle of life, right? Like this kind
Yep.
of like, woo, here everything comes to be. And so that what's happening here is that we've got Urania playing with her little wisdom, with her sister, these two different forms of movement,
Yep.
and space. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is interesting as well in the in the tradition, because as you say, I mean, I think this idea is an incredibly narrow interpretation of the history, to view it in that way. And I mean, in Isaiah, God says, "As one whom his mother comforts, so I will comfort you." There's this in God. There is transcendently and immanently fatherhood and motherhood.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, it's a kind of interpenetrative reality, right?
mm-hmm,
And so, and importantly as well, we're not far past the Annunciation just recently. But this is an important point as well, because what we've talked about before is this idea of receptivity, right? That to if you want to seek God's face, or you want to seek the divine, you have to polish the mirror, or you have to make yourself receptive. And here again, in this tradition and in this figure of Mary, we have the saying yes, don't we? We have the
Yeah.
kind of affirmation
Yeah.
of the birth of divinity.
Yeah.
And so again, symbolically, this is incredibly important, because this is again about that, a point you've made, in the kind of Nietzschean sense, but this kind of yes saying, this kind of affirmation of uh encountering eternity.
Mhm.
um and Dante would never have seen the images he could barely describe at the end of Paradise had he not sought to somehow recover the image of Beatrice.
Yeah.
It's her face he seeks, and through her grace, and through the sort of love he has for her, it's that which is the key to what in the end he's ineffably suspended in front of the glory of heaven. So
No, but this always comes back to me as far as like what it means to be a Platonist, and people say, well, you have to believe in the forms and things like this. And like the biggest takeaway is this thing called love is eros, right? And that great works of art like this, that like it's for the love of God, it's for the love of the divine, it's for the love of these gifts that we've been given, whether that be life itself or wisdom and life's love for us, and so yeah, when we think about what Milton, the inspiration is an inspiration that comes from a passion, a love, right? And a desire to get it right. And what better night for, and I mean night in the sense of with a KN, what better night for these principles than someone committed to, pouring their spirit out on paper and reflecting back the ideas of people that they've read and been inspired by, and they knew, touched, or looked at the face of their beloved and saw God, right? Like, that's the thing, is that, looking at my husband, and I see why, right?
yeah.
All of it is there, right? It's
Mhm.
and like this relationship, like again, we go back to this kind of, you need both the masculine and the feminine, and you need that within. You need to marry that, and so yeah, of course, a lot of heterosexually inclined men are going to see God in the feminine, right? Like that's their counterpart. That's what they're drawn to, and to make that woman not just mere body, right, but Urania, like Beatrice,
Mm.
like Sophia. To that's for me is just one of the highest honors that history can do. And so
Yeah, and this is what we kind of deliberated over when we were thinking about those passages in Symposium, where we were trying to discern what does it mean to distinguish between love in its kind of particularized form and love in its universalized form, as it were. And how can it be that you go through the particular to the universal? Does that mean you abandon then the particularity of love? No, of course not. What it means is that the person, the particularization is the form of the universal. And it's like you say, in the lover, in the husband or wife, in the partner, it's that universality that you perceive in their particularity, and it's only in them for you.
no, I mean Socrates
But it's
says.
all there, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in the Alcibiades one, he says, look, one of the greatest tasks we have is this task for self-knowledge. But let's imagine what that means. The Delphic Oracle, let's imagine if the Delphic Oracle said, not see thyself. Oh, sorry, not know thyself, but see thyself. And how do we do
Mm.
this? Not in a mirror, because what you're going to see in a mirror, right, is just an image or reflection. But no, look into the eyes of your lover and look
Mm.
into the best part of them. That iris, that's what see thyself would mean, right? Is that if you look into the eye, if the eye could try to see itself, it would have to look at another eye reflecting back on it, right? And
Yeah.
and so that true self-knowledge and ascension begins, or love begins in the gaze as it is in the phaedrus of the other, right? And seeing the
Mm.
God in them, not just that they're pregnant with something wholly divine, regardless of sex, gender, sexuality. Like that's the task, is to see it, in the eyes of your lover. And right now our lover is Milton, and so we can see it
Yeah.
in his
Yeah. This.
prose and proem, right? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's read a little bit more, because I'm excited to talk about. So here, where did we leave off? With thy
So
celestial, yeah, yeah.
upled by thee. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see if I can get it. Where to go? Upled by thee into the heavens of heavens, I have presumed, an earthly guest, and drawn imperial air, thy tempering. With like safety gilded down, return me to my native element, least from this flying seed unreined at once Bellerophon, though from a lower climb. Sorry, listeners, I'm not nearly as eloquent as Gareth. Dismounted on the Ilian field I fall, erroneous there to wander forlorn, half yet remains unsung, but narrow bound. Within the visible diurnal sphere, standing on earth, not wrapped above the pole, more safe I sing with mortal voice, unchanged, too hoarse or mute, though fallen on evil days, though fallen in evil tongues, in darkness, and with dangers compassed round, and solitude, yet not alone, while thou visit my slumbers nightly, or when morn purples the east, still govern thou my song, Urania, and fit audience find, though few, but drive far off the barbarous dissonance of Bacchus and his revelers, the race of that wild rout that tore the Thracian bard, and Rhodope, where woods and rocks have ears, to rapture till the savage clamor drowned both harp and voice, nor could the muse defend her son. So fail not thou who thee implores, for thou art heavenly, she an empty dream. Like, oh, like,
Yeah. I mean,
oh.
what's amazing here is that, so here we have the ascent, right? So he's upled by thee. So she takes him up, you know. Um, and I'm not an etymologist, but I think when you read passages like this, it's like we've talked about terms like inspiration. I mean, these have slightly different meanings, but
Mm.
he's drawn up into the empyreal air, right? So from earth, he gets a breath of the sort of heavens, um, and then guided down to his native element. Um, lest, and this is the Phaedrian image as well, isn't it? Like, lest the horses get out of control, lest the chariot, goes awry and he can't uh, get to the heavens. And it's onto the Ilian field that Bellerophon and Pegasus fall, from Zeus's bolt. So he sort of he lives the myth, or he embodies the myth in a description.
No, because one
Um,
of the things that I noted and wrote was here is like the parallels to the opening of Parmenides' poem, right, as well. So not just the Phaedrus, because the Phaedrus is inspired by Parmenides, where we get like these kinds of goddesses, whether they be the morn. Later on, we're going to get like virtue and other spirits like spontaneity that are
yeah,
there, guiding this chariot, which is very similar to the opening of Parmenides, where it's what's initiating the Parthenoi, is in fact all these feminine deities, some unnamed, some named, right? And you get the noise of the axle wheel, the pole, right? That the chariot is itself part of this construction of the world itself, right? So that
mm,
later on, we got the sphere and the importance of the sphere and the circumference and all
yeah,
these illusions that date way, almost goodness, almost 2,000 years before Milton, right? And
mm,
so more than 2,000 years, excuse me. And so that's one of the kind of amazing, beautiful things that recognizing the power of the symbol of the chariot and the chariot wheel and the poles and the axles and yeah, and it's kind of this image of turning back around and it being a journey and a rough one, right?
Yeah.
So we're gonna skip forward as we resume this conversation to Adam's request for Raphael to relate to him all that happened or occurred in the creation of the world before his own creation. And so, yeah, this is where Raphael basically kind of says, you've asked something you can ask, but try not to ask beyond certain things, which I find, again, this beautiful idea of like the limits and the places where the human wisdom can go, human inspiration can go, but it's not denying that you can't go there. It's almost as if like this is the goal to obtain, is to go beyond the human being, so that one day you'll understand, you know, there's more wisdom to be had. There's something more beyond the things that you're asking now. But please, for now, just know your place, that there's a certain limit to what you can ask. And so there's that. And so I'm going to start with enough is left besides to search and know, but knowledge is a food and needs no less her temperance over appetite. So to know and measure what the mind may well contain oppresses else with surfeit, and soon turns wisdom to folly and nourishment to wind, right? So again, this kind of, you know, here are the bounds, right? Again, much like Parmenides, where knowledge and human investigation go kind of hand in hand. So yeah, I don't know, do you have any thoughts there about that idea?
Yeah, Ecclesiastes, he has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's mind, so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. So, you know, there's this kind of idea, isn't there, that you know, we can behold creation and we can see the marvel of the great workmaster, you know, as described in poems as well, in Spenser, in those famous lines from Edmund Spenser's A Hymn in Honour of Beauty. What time this world's great workmaster did cast to make all things such as we now behold, that wondrous pattern soever it may be. This wondrous pattern, you know. But yeah, there's that tension then, isn't there, with that sort of apophatic dimension, the inability to really say it all,
Yeah.
to put your finger on it.
And therein explaining how it is that we embody and show this, as he's going to say later, this deep eternity, that we. So here I'm going to read that next passage. So basically, Raphael starts the kind of soliloquy of you know, the beginnings of creation, starting with, you know, the resolution of the fall, and then God saying, look, there's still plenty of angels here, we're still plenty populated, despite the fact that all the demons are in hell and Lucifer has been cast out for his, you know, silly little self-lostness self. So another world out of one man or race of men innumerable there to dwell, not here till by degrees of merit raised. So like, here's this idea, I'm going to create a world, right, that will, you know, have two worlds, so to speak. But you know what, human beings, once their merit is raised, this is what's going to happen. So not here till by degrees of merit raised, they open to themselves at length await. Up hither under long obedience tried, and earth be changed to heaven, and heaven to earth, one kingdom, joy and union without end. Meanwhile inhibit lacks, ye powers of heaven. And thou, my word begotten Son, by thee this I perform, speak thou, and be it done. My overshadowing spirit and might with thee I send along, ride forth and bid the deep within. Appointed bound be heaven and earth, boundless the deep, because I am who fill infinitude, nor vacuous the space, though I, uncircumscribed, myself retire, and put not forth my goodness, which is free to act or not. Like here, this idea, like God is filled with this, you know, infinity, and it's the boundless deep, right? This, I mean, this again, these are Platonic images of the Cora, of the abyss. I noted to you before we started recording how Even Nietzsche in Thus Spoke Zarathustra and the Seven Seals uses this kind of idea of deep, deep eternity, that this is what I love, this is the joy, as Milton calls it, this deep love of the infinite, as he says here. And again, those are femininely coded wombs, places, receptacles, containers that can be filled.
Yep.
And, and so, anyways, I just, my little Platonic fireworks were so happy to read that passage again. And so,
Yeah, and there's a beautiful passage in Dante, which I've put a note of here somewhere, but I just find this quickly. But it's
while you're finding that, I'll read. Oh,
here we
did
go.
you find
Yeah.
it? Okay.
I mean, my Italian's not particularly good, but non circumscrito è tutto circumscrive, which is the uncircumscribed that circumscribes all. So, this is that image of God is uncircumscribed. And Bonaventure has the image of I can't, forgive me, I can't remember it now. It's the center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere, isn't it? Or something
Mm,
like that. This image of God as being boundless, but also at the
bound.
center of
Yeah.
at the center of everything. Um, and even this is you mentioned the image of the Cora, and of course this is also true of the image of Mary, isn't it? You know, the fruit of thy womb. That it's within the boundary of the human body that eternity is born. The Logos, the the very filial Godhead, the Son, the begotten, who is the creator of the universe, is born from the finitude of the human womb.
No, and this is
So this is a kind of really interesting and powerful image, isn't it?
well, I mean, it's captured in this one line, and earth be changed to heaven, and heaven to earth, right? Like
Mm.
this, like we tend to think of these as two separate worlds, right? And every thinker worth their grain of salt sees it as this beautiful like wheel turning, where they change places, and then you realize that they were never actually two, that they were held together by a deep love or reverence that the human being can have. And I even wrote the Euthyphro dilemma here, where you love what the God loves, and that is piety. Like this paradoxical, we're reaching for the same thing, and God reaches for it absolutely, and we reach for it in a relative motion that carves out a path, and in that carving out a path, it's as we're tipping the scales and recreating the world ourselves. I mean, basically we get to this idea near the end of book 7, right, where we have to become kind of like this creator too, right? We have this work to do, this architecture. We have to forge these roads, and then do this kind of beautiful work. I'm sorry, I went off on a kind of crazy digression, but just this kind of
Yep.
beautiful relationship that that in the finite exists the infinite, and to get students to understand why this is such an epiphany. You can use your Descartes, you can use your Anselm, all these arguments for God's existence, but I always like, look, can you think infinity? Can you think all the numbers that go, if we're going to think numerical infinity? And of course not, you can't. But we create symbols like the Ouroboros, or the pi, right? And we show that even though we don't completely conceptually can't pin it down in the exact same way that Raphael says, I can't go beyond the limits of certain things, we can still work with it, right? Like we use pi to build skyscrapers, right? The infinity is in some sort of weird relationship with us that goes beyond just understanding. It's in the symbol, and it's in parts of our lives, and you can bear infinities. You do it all the time. Mathematics is one of the best ways to see it, but as this particular text also shows, like the infinity of ways of understanding the 7 days of creation, that it doesn't always have to be uniform. It could also become boniform. so
Yeah. Yeah. What I was thinking there was, to circle back slightly, was, this thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But
Mhm.
so as you said, this sort of union, um but taking Christ's words, the kingdom of God is within you.
Mm.
So the kingdom is within you if you want to discover it. So again, it's this sense of one opening oneself to the boundless deep,
Mm.
to the opening up of oneself to that possibility of that infinitude, um which, yeah, we so little do, don't we? I mean, we because we so readily deny that part of ourselves, um and and again, it's something about, isn't it, the nature of words here and the nature of language. And this is a kind of Owen Barfieldian kind of point, I suppose, isn't it? But this sense that you do, in some sense, rediscover meaning, or somehow encounter a certain kind of meaning when you read this kind of
Mm.
poetry. There is something transformative about it. There is something transcendent. There is something more than mere words. The that sort of takes you out and above, as it were.
I'm going to tell a
Um,
personal anecdote about the first time I read this text. So it probably won't be very helpful, but just this idea of like, what can you experience when you let yourself? Because a lot of people don't read poetry anymore, right? Like one of the reasons why Gareth is, an exceptional human being is that there's always a poem or a quote that has that kind of eloquence to it, that we so often just, no longer think is important when it comes to, yeah, public communication, all that fun stuff. And I think that that's just a gross era. And so one of the things I remember about reading Milton for the first time when I guess I was 24, I was pregnant with my oldest kid, and ladies out there who I suffer from the kind of morning sickness that you have the entire 9 months. It doesn't go away. It's kind of awful. And so I'm bedridden because it's the first couple of months, because it's so bad. And here I am, trying to, get out of my body, so to speak, and to experience this rapture and joy by reading, Milton for the first time. And like, I remember the vividness of the world that was created, so much so that it almost felt like I was in the story, right? Like you become these characters. And that's a true gift that poetry, I think, offers us still and to this day. And just recently, a student came up to me and said, "Look, over the weekend or over the last week, I took your advice to heart that nobody reads the Odyssey anymore, and so I decided to read it, and I thought it was fantastic." And I was like, "Oh, poetry is coming alive! It's returning because it speaks with that mystery." And that cadence, that magic of what actually inspired it, and so, anyways, that's why I love returning to this particular text. So please forgive me for that
yeah, and
digression.
again, when
So,
you think about historical consciousness, out of which all of these sort of layers of meaning are built, out of which the weight, that idea in Emerson that all words are kind of fossilized metaphors, that language is a kind of repository
mhm,
of consciousness. And you see how these writers would be reading the same Plato we're reading, the same,
mhm,
and building and building and building, um, so that they can't be mere words. They take on the character of lived, encounter of joy, of pain, of love, of sorrow, um, and all of that is embedded within it, isn't it? And so, and again, I think to really get into these texts and understand even just the subtle difference in how we use certain kinds of words now in ways that we don't, that weren't in a text such as this. Um, it's really transformative because that language again has this different relation to reality. It doesn't stand apart from it in the way that our words tend to do.
Yeah,
Um, the naming of something out there is the naming of an inner reality,
right.
right? It's not the sort of nominalist kind of or it's an affirmation of the interconnection between subject and object, not their separation.
No, 100%. I mean, like, this is one of the things. I think one of the reasons why I love poetry so much, or play, like, people who speak with that imagery and that those symbols, is because it is that mirror to go back. It's like, oh, thank God somebody else sees the infinity of the world, sees the how to make the impossible possible, even
Mm.
through just written text. I mean, this listen to this. So he's talking about the creation. He's in the creation of the world now. And he's like, his longitude through heaven's high road, the gray dawn and the Pleiades before him danced, shedding sweet influence. Less bright the moon, but opposite in leveled west was set his mirror, with full face barring her light from him. For other light she needed none in that aspect, and still that distant keeps till night. Then in the east her turn she shines, revolved on heaven's great axle, and her reign with thousand lesser lights divide holds with thousand stars that then appeared sprangling the hemisphere. Then first adorned with their brightness luminaries that set and rose, glad evening and glad morn crowned the fourth day. Like this, the like personifying the sun and the moon, right? Like these are
Mm.
this is little Danny, 7 years old, talking to the moon and and like and then seeing Milton, make that playful concept come alive, right? And
Yeah,
I almost vividly feel the Pleiades dancing, oh, look at those
yeah.
beautiful sisters. So again, that imagery of women dancing, in much the same way of Urania and Sophia, and so.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, and there's any number of passages here, aren't there, that you can um invoke to that end, round about line 500. Now heaven in all her glory shone and rolled her motions as the first great first mover's hand first wheeled their course. Earth in her rich attire, consummate, lovely smiled. Air, water, earth, by fowl, fish, beast was flown, was swum, was walked, frequent, and of the sixth day yet remained. And so this, yeah, I mean, I think that these few hundred lines here are just, yeah, some of the most incredible, really, in the Western canon for that sheer poetic beauty of creation.
And I mean, honestly, again, it's peppered with pre-Socratic and Platonic
Yeah.
conceptions of cosmogony. So just go back to 240, right? Like when he's creating the world, right? Adverse to life, then found them conglobed, like things to like. Sorry, this Empedoclean idea that
Mm.
we're taking a gaos, right? This raw, infinite. He even calls it Earth that was the primary matter, and then shifting it so like to like, so that nothing is actually discoordinate, but is always in concord. Even and the heaven he named the firmament. So even
Yeah.
and morning chorus sung the second day. So it's just this beautiful syncretic things that we need in this world, right? Like we feel that in today's age, to bring it back to a political theme, when I was talking about a feminist reading of Milton, or what might be a feminist reading of Milton, would be one that might, and again, I'm not out there reading feminist critiques of Milton, but I can imagine, as somebody who's an expert in that kind of literature, that yeah, that another critique you could make is that it's syncretic and it's taking from traditions that aren't its own. And it's like, no, like that shows this deep love and reverence for, that we value these stories from people who don't belong to our traditions. We can be inspired by something other. I always give the example to students, like, yes, maybe God has died according to our modern worldview. C.S. Lewis didn't believe that, so he created Narnia. He rebirthed a different version of the Christ narrative so as to implant it back into people's hearts that, yeah, we've got this modernity thing. We've got this thing that's turning everybody into ash and losing a sense of meaning. But we need our
Mm,
Christ. We need our Phanes. We need our Aslans to remind us of the human being's potential as, Christ said, of the kingdom within. And that within
mm.
is this deep eternity, which means we have an infinite well of wisdom and Urania to inspire us if she so graces us, if we are so receptive. And so,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think paradise can always be lost
mhm,
and it can always be regained.
mhm.
And, why did Milton write the poem? Why do any poets write poems? Why do we talk about these very things as we are now? It's because we sense that these ideas, as profound, as continual as they are also fragile and um, urgent. But they need the breath of inspiration to keep them moving, and they need um, the imagination,
Yeah.
because without that, without that creative impetus that we all have as the gift of our being, we can lose sight of those things. And I mean, if we give those things away to technology, if we replace our love of reading for the kind of quick summary that an app can give us, or uh, any of these kind of things, then there's a danger, not necessarily always, but there's a danger we can lose sight of some of these things.
I mean, but this is why Paradise Lost is an eternal story, right? It's a story of
Mm,
our own fall, right? Our own
yeah,
self-conceit, our own
exactly.
rebellion,
Yeah.
but then also our own creative redemption in the whole of the world. I mean, one of the lines that stood out to me is 3:12, and fruit tree yielding fruit after her kind, whose seed is in herself upon the earth. So the earth has its own seed of, this infinite creative
Mm,
potential, and a seed seems so tiny, right? And it is so fragile, and that's what I think is one of these beautiful things about people who belong to history, people who cannot help but turn to the books of old and to find some sort of joy in library stacks and the smell of old books. I'm sorry, just the vividness of a lot of my 20s is coming to the fore. And you belong to history because you see how fragile, like, it could have been, as Foucault would say, it could have gone in a completely different direction, like all these contingent choices, which means it's not futile. It means every person in their small contingent seemingly accidental actions can do the work of recreating the world. And so
mm.
I think
Yeah,
both of
and
us,
this is everyone's inheritance, isn't
yeah,
it? You could go out and get yourself a copy of this book for a couple of dollars,
yeah,
and you know
for free online, I'm
for
sure.
free, or yeah, exactly. And it's right there.
Hmm. I mean, I don't know if you do this, Gareth. Do you ever mourn that you'll never be able to read all of them?
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's well, perhaps in this form.
Yeah. Nice. Well, I think we should pick this up again.
Yeah.
So maybe we should do a series on Paradise Lost because I do believe we were both inspired. So much so that I felt perfectly comfortable just wandering off. So thank you for putting up with me. Do you want to have the last few words on books?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think we've been overwhelmed with so many incredible lines of poetry that it seems hard to find something to finish on, really.
Maybe the closing paragraphs, right? Where it's God rejoicing in his creation.
Who can impair thee, mighty king, or bound thy empire? Easily the proud attempt of spirits apostate and their counsels vain thou hast repelled, while impiously they thought thee to diminish, and from thee withdrew the number of thy worshippers. Who seeks to lessen thee? against his purpose serves to manifest the more thy might. His evil thou usest, and from thence createst more good. Witness this new made world, another heaven from heaven gate not far, founded in view of the clear higher line, the glassy sea of amplitude almost immense, with stars numerous, and every star perhaps a world of destined habitation. But thou knowest their seasons. Among these the seat of men, earth with her nether ocean circumfused, their pleasant dwelling place. Thrice happy men and sons of men whom God hath thus advanced, created in his image, there to dwell and worship him, and in reward to rule over his works on earth, in sea, on air, and multiply a race of worshippers holy and just, thrice happy if they know their happiness and persevere upright. So sung they, and the Empyrean rung with alleluias. Thus was Sabbath kept. And thy request think now fulfilled, that asked how first this world and face of things began, and what before thy memory was done from the beginning, that posterity informed by thee might know, if else thou seekest aught, not surpassing human measure, say.
Again, as always, thank you, Gareth.
Thanks. No, I
I
enjoyed
look
that.
forward
Thank
to
you.
the next one. See you soon.
See you.
Oh dear Diana, tell me why do the things that are beautiful always have a darker side? Oh dear Diana, tell me why is the good never good enough underneath the dirt and scars?